Well, hello, happy Saturday. Welcome to a slightly tardy-farty episode of Mutant Watch. This is episode 10, unless it isn't, and it's actually episode 9. I'm your guest host this week, Matt. Duna is out ruling the world right now with her school stuff. So, Duna, take a well-deserved break. You rock. With me this week is Gabriel de Jesus, fellow Mutant Watcher, and all around gadfly. But this week we are going to roll deep with Age of Apocalypse, and we're just going to get into everything that we can in the time that we've got. I promise we won't go to an hour and 45 minutes again this week. I mean, it's just two of us, so it seems unlikely. What do you think, Gabriel?
I would be rather impressed and shocked and a little scared if we did manage to ramble on about Age of Apocalypse for that long.
I mean, crazier things have happened. I'm not day drinking, so I'm prone to rambling less. But yeah, let's just get into this thing, because I know you and I actually have kind of differing opinions on Age of Apocalypse, which gonna make for some interesting conversation. But if you're just joining in on Age of Apocalypse, maybe haven't read it or don't know where to start, we'll get you up to speed this week. So, in 1995, the X-Men were at the peak of their popularity. The cartoon was riding high. Woo! Da-na-na-na-na-na. And Marvel was ready to do something wild and crazy. And so they said, well, we're going to kill Professor X and chuck the entire X-Men line out. And we freaked out a little bit. Because, I mean, yes, there was technically an internet at the time, but it wasn't anything like, hey, there's B. Mr. Arbizo, welcome, sir. We've got our Wrestling Watch host with the most, Brian Arbizo, jumping in. Woo! Happy to be doing the show with you again. It's been a while.
It has.
Makes me feel all kinds of ways inside. So,
disgust?
Nah. Now we were just digging into the origins of the Age of Apocalypse, and it was It was early '95, and X-Men couldn't have been more popular than they were by the mid '90s. I mean, and comics in general, the collector's bubble hadn't really burst yet, or it was just starting to burst, and holy crap, here comes Marvel. We're going to kill Professor X and cancel the entire X-Men line. And fandom just collectively lost their shit. And, Brian is nodding his head in assent. Excuse me. But we soon came to find out that, and I mean, and again, at this time, death in comics wasn't happening every other month like it is now. So for them to just outright saying, we're killing Professor X was huge. And I mean, maybe older readers than me, I was 14 at the time, didn't, maybe they were a little more cynical, but I think for our age group, our minds were collectively blown. I mean, Brian, would you agree with that sentiment?
Oh yeah, because I think at that time, like I don't know if I was collecting X-Men as much as I did that after Age or during Age of Apocalypse, but definitely, like I always knew it from more of the animated series version, and for me, it was like, oh my god, this is so dark, it's so gritty, and for 7-year-old, 8-year-old me, it blew my mind.
Oh yeah.
It was awesome.
Like I can't imagine being 7 or 8 years old reading Age of Apocalypse for the first time.
Yeah,
because it's dark. Mm-hmm. Like Gabriel, I mean, how old were you in '95?
I was 10 in '95, but okay. I also wasn't reading X-Men yet.
Okay,
in '95, Age of Apocalypse is something that I discovered after the fact.
Gotcha. Okay.
So that might have had something to do with all of my opinions on it, is I don't have the nostalgia and I wasn't there for the hype.
Gotcha. So They built up to it for several months, and it kicks off with the Legion Quest storyline. And for those who don't know, and I mean, I hope there's few of you, but we always have to err on the side of caution, or at least should. Legion is Professor X's Omega level mutant son. He's always been portrayed as having multiple personalities, or alters now, and each one of his alters had a different power. He had been rendered comatose at the end of the Murile saga, which we discussed during our episode on mutant crossovers. And while he was comatose, his alters merged, his mind healed, and when he woke up, he was uber powerful. And one of my, and not just because of his power level, but because he was in control of his mind, and all of his alters had merged for the first time. So one of my favorite lines out of Legion Quest Part 1 is somebody that's working for the government in Israel is asked, what kind of power level are we dealing with on a scale of 1 to 10? And he says 35. And, obviously that's a nice little exaggeration, but it really hits home how powerful Legion has become. So for some reason, the X-Men only send 4 X-Men to deal with him, which is not the best plan. I mean, granted, it's Iceman, Psylocke, Bishop, and Storm, which is a pretty awesome quartet, but you're dealing with freaking Legion. You should probably call the Avengers, the Fantastic Four, everybody who's ever been an X-Man, Spider-Man, Aunt May, like everyone needs to be involved with this, but for editorial reasons, it didn't happen. So Legion's plan is to make his father's dream happen by traveling back in time, which is a power that he now has because of his healed mind, and kill Magneto before he can ruin Xavier's dream. So he goes back in time, he loses his memory, and so do the X-Men that get sent back or taken back with him. And basically, they all eventually get their memories back, and whoopsie-poo, Legion kills Xavier instead of Magneto because Xavier selflessly jumped in front of the bolt of energy that was going to kill Magneto. And that's bad for everybody. And they did this really cool build-up where to really show the expanse and the consequence of Legion's actions by having the Imkron crystal way off in Shi'ar space beginning to crystallize and destroy reality, and it was creeping towards Earth. And that's, that was a great little narrative trick that they used. Take a shot to show just how big of an impact Legion's actions were having. So great stuff. And I'll also say that right as the Imkron crystallization wave is about to hit, we get the first full-on kiss between Rogue and Gambit, and just killer moment. They're, all of their world is about to die. These two crazy kids just take that leap and smush face. So very awesome moment.
For me, since we're speaking of Legion Quest, for me, this is the first time I've ever got comic books that were crossovers. So we're talking about, this was also the first time I purchased X Factor, Cable. I think there's 2 running series of X-Men. So it actually, I mean, although I knew of X Factor because they had an appearance on the X-Men animated series a couple of times. So I knew about the history, but I never actually had the comic books to back it up. Because I mean,
right.
At 8, 9, whatever age I am, maybe a little bit older, I don't remember, but I wasn't buying it for myself. I used to get them at Walgreens at this time because I didn't know that a comic book store existed. It's just where I knew that I could get it. So for me, that was the first time that I was able to pick up and actually learn the stories for it. So for me, this isn't just, nostalgia. This is actually really, this whole storyline for me was the opening for the comic book world and not just the X-Men in the 2 running series.
Well, and that's just such a powerful memory, because to me, that right there is like a cornerstone of your fandom in that regard.
Yeah.
Sort of like how Executioner's Song is for me, because that was going on right when I was in 92 when I was getting into X-Men and comics in general. So I could spend a whole. I threatened / said in the crossovers episode I could definitely spend an entire episode talking about that story, but I won't make y'all listen to that.
Yeah, it comes later.
We should actually do a show on that. I actually have the complete ominous, or not. Maybe it's not an ominous, but the complete series in trade.
I have the complete omnibus, but I don't think I've read it in its entirety. I've read like the scattered issues that I have found in my random collection, but I got the omnibus for that in a con one day and just never sat down and read it all.
Oh man, such an astoundingly good story. And I mean, it's kind of like the stealth origin of Cable. And that actually leads me to, I want to say it's Cable number 20, which is the last issues of the series before Age of Apocalypse happened. And that's a really key issue continuity-wise, because that's where we finally, Cable, Jean, and Cyclops sit down and, you know, they all reveal, hey, I know you're my parents. Oh my gosh, we knew you were our son. And they all hug it out like right as the MCON crystal wave hits. So,
I'm also not mistaken, something with Domino and Cable happened.
I think they smooch, but I'm not 100% sure on that.
Yeah. That was the first time that I was introduced to them as a couple.
Right. So, reality's destroyed. No thanks to the X-Men, who only sent 4 people to deal with this Omega level mutant. And
35 on a scale of 1 to 10.
Exactly.
Let's send 4 people. They'll be fine.
Yeah, why not? You've got Storm in the mix, and she's an Omega level mutant, but come on.
So was Iceman, but nobody knew it back then.
Yeah, right. He hadn't yet had that transformation, really. Or I guess it was just starting to be shown what he was capable of, because Emma Frost woke up in his body and showed all these powers that he could do that he'd never known about.
That was right after, right?
No, it was right before, because it happened during Phalanx Covenant, or right before Phalanx Covenant, which was like 4 issues prior to Age of Apocalypse, or 4 months.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, Phalanx Covenant and Age of Apocalypse happened really close together.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate because of that proximity, Phalanx Covenant got overlooked in a lot of ways.
That was the birth of Generation X, no?
Yes. Yeah, because we only got 4 issues of the new Gen X monthly series before it got shunted away to Age of Apocalypse. So that was lame. But, so, X-Men Alpha one-shot comes out. Shiny chromium cover with Joe Mad art. Oh, RB. I love it so much. And holy crap, like right there on page 1, it is dark. It's like the darkest thing I think to this day I'd ever read from Marvel in that like leading up to that time period. But I mean, it opens with Bishop, 20 years older, because he got stuck in the past because of the chronal nature of him being time displaced, and he's climbing over just a giant mountain of corpses. He gets to the top of it, and there's just piles of corpses as far as the eye can see. And you just know this is really bad. This isn't just Apocalypse being, a stock supervillain. He's murdered most everything, right? And we get introduced to this world where his 4 various horsemen have their dominions across the North America, and the last vestiges of human resistance are in Europe, and the X-Men are on the run and underground and led by Magneto and Rogue. So we get some...
Who have a baby.
And they had a baby! That's right, because Rogue is able to control her powers in this reality and turn them on and off.
No, I don't think so.
They just didn't work on Magneto because electromagnetic field
was it?
Some other weird reasoning, because she still couldn't control her powers.
Okay, I
Yeah, and I think she ended up getting someone's power. Was it Scarlet Witch's power? Someone?
No, it wasn't her.
Polaris.
Polaris's power. I knew it was some daughter of Magneto. So it was both of their I don't know what. They just rolled with it somehow.
Right.
But she still it gave her the same power that she had in continuity. It's not like she had like magnetic powers. She still had her super strength, the ability to fly and all that. I don't think she actually had Polaris's powers.
Okay. I had honestly forgotten about all of that. But we got some fan favorite characters out of it. We got Blink, who had been introduced and killed pretty quickly, and she was kind of meek and timid, but she's a badass in Age of Apocalypse.
And a different color for some odd reason.
I think that might have just been a coloring issue. Like, I don't think there was anything deliberate behind that, but I could be wrong.
Blink 616 is like this purplish gray, and AOA Exile's Blink is this bright pink. So
really?
It might have been a colorist mistake initially, but they've stuck with it since then. So
gotcha. Okay, I did not realize that. Got Morph, the Plastic Man-esque comedic relief, who 14-year-old Matt thought was the funniest thing in the world.
He was great.
Yeah, I still love AOA Morph. Like, I to this day, it kind of aggravates me. They've never figured out a way to have that Morph in the 616 in some way.
Which is pretty easy for them to do, since AOA Morph is essentially the same as Exile's Morph, just with a different background.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And Exile's Morph is still, in his weird way, floating around.
That's interesting. Having not read Exiles, it's on my to-do list. I was unaware of that. Let's see. We've got Sabretooth as one of the good guys. Wild Child is being completely feral. Nightcrawler is like basically the same, but willing to kill. God, who else is on that core X-Men team, guys?
What are we talking about? Astonishing or amazing?
Well, just like the general team as it's introduced in X-Men Omega or X-Men Alpha. I mean,
so you have Exodus, Quicksilver.
Ah, yes,
Dazzler and Banshee.
Yeah.
Storm, Banshee, they're basically the same. Dazzler's powers are way amped up. Like, she can make hard light projections of things and attack you with them. I feel like, Rogue obviously is there, but some of the more familiar faces are not there. Gambit is off doing his own thing. Jean is not there. Wolverine is not there. Cyclops is not there. Oh,
Iceman was part of the core
Beast
team.
is not there. We've got X-Men who are playing for the dark side in Age of Apocalypse. And that leads us to the Dark Beast, leads us to Cyclops and Havoc. Cannonball and Paige Guthrie are working for the bad guys.
Cannonball and Elizabeth Guthrie, one of the Guthrie kids. Yeah, one of the Guthrie kids who, to this day, has never exhibited powers in the 616. They took her and they gave her the ability to grow. Yeah. While Paige was the odd Guthrie out who actually was with the X-Men in their Generation X title. And she was resentful against her older siblings for being evil, which is an odd continuity blip with Age of Apocalypse. In 616, Paige is older, but somehow in Age of Apocalypse, Elizabeth is older.
Oh, weird.
Which could just be because they have. I think a lot of the Guthrie kids are made up on the spot, and I don't think they decided the age order by the time Age of Apocalypse happened.
Yeah, I feel like that's pretty true.
And I think she was a brunette in Age of Apocalypse.
I think you're right.
Yep, she was.
Yeah. But Apocalypse running everything. He's got his 4 horsemen. We got some new ones that are show up. We got Holocaust, who is basically like a worse version of Apocalypse. He just wants to kill everybody, regardless of survival of the fittest. You've got Abyss, who is just weird and awesome and frips around and sucks you into his void, which is could be code for something, guys. I don't know. Let's see, Mikhail, Rasputin, and then Mr. Sinister. And Mr. Sinister is more or less the same, which is fine. You know, he's still pretty awesome. And you know what to me, the cool thing about the way we enter Age of Apocalypse is that it's really the end of the second act. Like everything from X-Men Alpha through the 4 issues of the 8 series is the end, and then the grand finale, the third act is X-Men Omega. So from that, you've got, you know, the X-Men stumble onto Bishop, and Bishop has this wild story that reality isn't right. And that's really what tips everything off. So, you know, you've got the new 8 new series. You've got Astonishing X-Men, Amazing X-Men, Cable became X-Man, Next became Generation Next, X-Factor was Factor X. Who am I for? Oh, Wolverine becomes Weapon X, because why wouldn't he? And
X-Force became Gambit in the Externals.
Yes.
Yes.
And then Excalibur.
They changed the spelling.
Yeah.
It's still Excalibur, but just X with a hyphen and a more British spelling of the brr at the end. And what am I forgetting? I think I've only named 7.
I think that's it.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry. They had the X-Men Unlimited became Chronicles.
Yes, X-Men Chronicles. And then they also did a 2-issue Universe X that kind of dug into the other Marvel heroes. Where are they? What are they doing during AOA? And I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about it because it's not very good. And it's really not that crucial. So each of, you know, Bishop shows up, and that splits everything up into everyone has a piece of the pie in terms of their mission. So, you know, Gambit and the Externals are on a mission to steal a piece of the Imcron crystal. Excalibur, they have to go find Destiny and to use her visions to determine if what Bishop is saying is true, and so on and so forth.
Well, I thought that they needed needed Destiny because she was one of the few people in Age of Apocalypse who didn't exist in 616. Like, I thought that was the same reason why they needed magic. Am I making all this up?
No, that's right, because they needed the two of their powers to work together. And in this world, of course, magic is, you know, Ilyana is still a little girl, and she's being held captive in the Sugarman slave caves or mines or whatever. And so that is the mission of the kids over in Generation Next, is to go rescue her. So that, her power is supposed to work in tandem for getting Bishop back in time to stop the assassination of Xavier. So, and then you've got, kind of, to me, the odd man out is X-Man, because, you know, you obviously don't have Cable, but you have to do a Cable-esque character to fill the void of that book. So they create Nate Gray, whole cloth, brand new character to support this book. And he's Sinister's clone child of Jean Grey and Cyclops. And basically Nate Gray, in a lot of ways, is what Cable would be power-wise if he wasn't inhibited by the techno-organic virus. And he's kind of a whiny little bastard. There are a lot of it. He just, like, there was this weird trend in the 90s of teen characters being written in the most obnoxious and whiny ways possible. And that was supposed to make them edgy and you know, have tood, because it was the 90s. and it just came off. It did rub me the wrong way. Like X-Man of the four or of the main books is the one that I like the least, even though it does have awesome art from Steve Skroce.
I find it very funny considering the fact that my opinion on Age of Apocalypse is literally the opposite of yours. X Chronicles and X-Men were two of the ones that I kind of appreciated the most. Because my favorite thing about Age of Apocalypse is these different takes on characters and these little Easter eggs, and that's literally the whole point of X Chronicles. Like, it doesn't really serve a plot. It just has, here's these fun stories of characters in different ways. And I like X-Men better than most of the others simply because in the long run, it's the only one that matters.
That's very true.
When Age of Apocalypse ends, with the exception of the times that universe pops back in, nothing that happened really makes a difference. Wherein X-Man, this is his origin story. And then he pops into the main universe for like 75 issues and another crossover and joins some teams and yada, yada, yada.
Well, no, that's actually really true, because I remember after Age of Apocalypse was done, I kept waiting for the moment when the team found out that this had happened, in the 616, and it just never did. Other than, like, there's an issue of X-Men, I want to say it's maybe number 49, where Bishop's memories are jacking with him because he's got, like, subconscious memories of the Age of Apocalypse, but he doesn't know what they are, so they're slowly driving him crazy. But beyond that, they really don't. Like, at that afterwards, they were in such a mad dash to get to Onslaught the next year.
So I don't know if you remember. So after X-Men Omega, there was X-Men Prime.
Yes,
which is where they were all living through it, and they weren't sure because Bishop was going crazy, or actually his memories were actually just merging. But there was a time when they didn't remember, and they were just kind of going over it, going with it. Is he going crazy? Is this true? Yeah, and which also led into all the current stories. I thought they touched on it pretty heavily. Maybe it was just that issue, or maybe because it was just something I read over and over again. But I definitely feel I do want to go back to one of the Four Horsemen real quick. Holocaust was the scariest villain ever.
No, definitely.
For me, it was Sugar Man. That something about that design and that personality. He is just the grossest thing to ever hit the pages of an X-Men title.
Definitely.
And he just makes my skin crawl every time he shows up.
I was super happy when both of those characters jumped into the 616.
Yeah. Just the thought of being like nuked by his holes in his arm just scared the crap out of me.
Yeah. Well, it's such a powerful design for Holocaust because it's so simple, right? I mean, he's a skeleton inside of this big suit, and he just blasts you and kills everything in his path, and it's so simple. I'm not sure who designed him. I mean, it almost had to have been Joe Madureira, just because he was drawing Astonishing, which is where Holocaust was mainly featured.
Yeah. And I feel like Sugar Man is kind of like somebody that, so for Holocaust, for me, it was so like fresh and so new. I feel like Sugar Man for me was kind of like, there's people that actually exist like that.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Like, so, Sugar Man is gross.
Yeah.
I mean, he's exploitative. He doesn't care if you live or die. I mean, he's like this, in a lot of ways, he's like a 19th century slave labor driver.
Well, we have in the comments, actually, Ross chimed in, another comic watcher, and he just flat out says, Sugar Man is every child's nightmare.
I agree with that.
Are we live right now?
We are live on YouTube.
Yes. Okay, because I looked on Facebook and I didn't see anything.
So. I don't have the Facebook sign-ins, so I wasn't able to make that part happen.
Gotcha.
Unfortunately. So... Yikes! I'll have to DM Duna after the show to get it for future episodes. But anyway, so yeah, Sugar Man, grody, and just a killer design from Chris Bacalo. And I don't want to, like, I love Chris Bacalo. I know he's kind of a divisive artist, but I really, really loved his early to mid 90s work because it had this kind of grungy darkness to it that just played so well into Age of Apocalypse. And his design work was spot on. There was lots of detail. Like, he'll do this thing occasionally now, where he does these extreme close-ups to where you can't quite tell what the hell's happening in the panel. And he didn't do that so much then. Like, his line was a lot finer. And I don't know, his art just worked better for me then. One of our commenters, erstwhile mutant watcher Ross Hutchinson, has corrected me in that Holocaust was created by Roger Cruz and Scott Lobdell. So, Ross, thank you for that. This is why you should be on the show right now. You can check me in real time. You can check me in real time. So, but I gotta say, I was like, Factor X wound up being my dark horse favorite book out of them. First of all, you got like a young Steve Epting on the art. That right there is a major selling point for me. But I love good, solid family drama, and Factor X was just rife with that. And plus, it's all about bad guys. I mean, any book that can do all about bad guys in a good way is going to get my attention. And because, Cyclops is still largely Cyclops to this point. He's the good soldier, and he follows orders, and he just happens to be on the side of Apocalypse in this reality. And
at least at first.
And Factor X is all about him gradually realizing that he is on the wrong side, and his brother Havoc, who loves being on the wrong side and thinks it's the right side, has all the jealousy and just he's constantly jockeying for position, and it just there's a Shakespearean dynamic to Factor X that I thought worked really well. Plus, you got Dark Beast running around doing just horrible things.
Yeah, he definitely made me hate Dark Beast for a really long time, or Beast for a really long time, because it was really hard when they switched back to 616 to like undo him. For me, it was really weird because when you're watching it, you still see these characters as what you know. It's all, it's hard to separate it. So for me, when some of them went evil, it was really hard for me to turn it around, except for Havoc. For whatever reason, when Havoc switched back, I was like, oh, that's not really him. That's just right.
Well, Havoc has had like 2 or 3 evil turns in the 25 years since Age of Apocalypse. So.
Yeah, I mean, right now,
Havoc isn't so much evil as just constantly just making dumb choices that he thinks are good, and then not. Except for that one whole axis switch thingy that.
Yeah, I'm like, a lot of times with him going bad, it's the result of brainwashing or something like that. So, but Havoc to me, just in general, is almost the epitome of a character that nobody quite knows what to do with because he's constantly in another character's shadow, Cyclops in this case. And there's some of my favorite stories involve Havoc, but it never quite seems to stick, So having him go full dark side in Age of Apocalypse, it's almost like they're committing with that guy finally. Like, this is who we want him to be. This is who he's going to be. Maybe it's only for 4 months, but damn it, he's bad.
I also really loved Havoc and Polaris together. So for when they were, not together in Factor X, like, at all, it really made me hate him during that series.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So they did really good writing, because when they wanted me to hate somebody, I hated them.
Yeah. Oh, Cannonball too. Like, Cannonball is pure, just cruel white trash in there in Age of Apocalypse.
So I was not a fan of Factor X at all.
Okay.
It wasn't my least favorite title, but it came close. I don't know, just something about it. It just didn't intrigue me. Like listening you talk about all this dynamics and things, I didn't get much of any of that. To me, the Summer Brothers were just different shades of whiny. Like Cyclops was I'm pretty sure Cyclops was still mooning over Jean, who picked Weapon X over him, and Havoc just spent the whole time trying to prove he was better than Scott. And both of the Guthries were there, which usually is enough for me to like a comic. Is you throw a Guthrie in it, it has my money. But they were unlikable, but not unlikable to the point where you love to hate them. Just unlikable to the point where I didn't enjoy them on the page. I like Doc Beast and his interest with all the siblings he gathered was interesting, but not enough to carry a series.
Also, Factor X introduced Jesse Bedlam, who would later show up in regular continuity in X-Force, I believe, right? Yeah. Never a major character, but worth notating.
He tried his best.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I actually want to say both those series were written by John Ostrander, so that it would explain the crossover there. So Gambit and the Externals was an interesting one because that's a heist comic, which of course plays to Gambit's strengths as a character. And it takes the story out into space. It's got Jubilee, Lila Cheney, Strong Guy, Sunspot, yes. And
the bad guy is Richter.
That's right. Richter is an uber douche in that series.
Oh God, I hate him.
Yeah,
I hate Age of Apocalypse Richter.
You're supposed to be fair.
A loser. Like he's not even like evil. He's just a loser in that whole series.
As the kids say, he's thirsty.
He's not. He's just pathetic. Like it's sad.
Yeah, like he's the one that wants to be Cannonball or wear Cannonball Apoca
Cop. Yep. And a
Richter
bad Apoca Cop too. Richter is the worst Apoca Cop. Like he can't even do it well. He just fails at every turn. I love Gambit and the Externals. It's actually one of the ones that I actually that I would sit down and I'd reread. But if they were up against anyone competent, they probably would have failed.
Right.
But because they were up against Richter and the mindless multiple men clone army.
Oh, that's right.
It just wasn't as difficult as it would have been otherwise.
Sure. And I mean, part of the hallmark of Richter in that series is he's constantly trying and failing. Yes. Like he's actually more of an unintentional threat than a direct threat because
he's almost an ally at that point.
Right. What? And then that series was written by X-Force team Fabian Nicieza and drawn by a young whippersnapper named Tony Daniel. And they go out into Shi'ar space to steal the shard of the Imkron crystal. And it's fun. It's probably got the most compression in storytelling because there's so much. Like, you could easily take the plot of Gambit and the Externals and probably double the issue length. Just to dive into some of the. Like, I'd be interested to know how is the Shi'ar Empire different without the X-Men having intervened, at any point in time.
And that was also a comic that I feel every character mattered.
Yes.
Gambit might have been the big one because he was the thief, but Lila Cheney was actually Gambit's love interest, which is a huge shift from the original comics. Sunspot sacrifices himself to save them. Jubilee is Gambit's sidekick, where in 616 he is Wolverine's sidekick. And then you have Strong Guy, who is the traitor in all of this, out of love for Lila Cheney and bitterness and jealousy that she picked Gambit. Where it really felt like every character was on that team for a reason.
I agree with that.
Which is something I felt was missing in the main X-Men comics. Age of Apocalypse.
I would actually say that the characters in Gambit and the externals, like the good guys, not Richter, are probably the collectively closest to their 616 versions, with the exception of Strong Guy's Betrayal.
And Lila. Lila Cheney was much more active.
Yeah.
Than I've ever seen her in 616.
Well, I mean, you could trade out Gambit or Jubilee or mostly, for the most part, Roberto with their 616 counterparts, and the series would work the same. I don't think you can make that claim in any other of the Age of Apocalypse titles. And I'm not trying to say that was, like a lazy writing choice or anything like that. I think it just happened to happen that way.
For me, I don't know. I only really like the first two issues of it. I don't disagree with anything that you guys are saying. It didn't hold my interest when I was 8, but I think you guys are coming at it from a different angle than I did. I didn't really care about the storytelling or the relationships. I wanted to see, the action part of it, the story part of it. So as a kid, it was kind of like, eh. And even when I reread it, I'm like, okay, I'll reread all the issues, but it's still one of the ones where I'm like, yeah. So
then we have Excalibur, with an X, not an EX, and a BRE, not a BUR. This one stars Nightcrawler, and I want to say that this is, for me as a reader, patient zero for, oh my God, Nightcrawler should be starring in a solo series at all times. Because he's so cool in this series. I mean, it's written by Warren Ellis, and I believe the artist Ken Lashley, who was drawing Excalibur at the time. Ross, this would be a good time for a fact check. And they have to go to, I believe it's the Savage Land, to fetch.
I thought it was an island. I thought they were going to some island because there was a boat. There was boats. That was a huge thing in Excalibur. Was something about boats because Kurt was a pirate.
Yeah, it was called Haven or something. It was
right,
like X Haven or something.
Maybe it was just near to the Savage Land or something.
I think they needed, in order to get to X Haven, you needed to go to like the Savage Land.
Avalon. It was called Avalon.
And you needed to go through a ritual led by, it was either Kane Marco or John Proudstar. And that was how you found your way to Avalon.
That's right. That's how they worked Juggernaut into it. I mean, obviously he's a normal dude in this reality, and he never found the
Impront crystal.
No, not Impront. Crystal, Sidorak. And so this one's got Dead Man Wade instead of Deadpool.
I felt so bad for him.
Yeah, like this is just Deadpool, just bug fuck crazy, and not in the way that we're accustomed to.
And
he's purely evil. The Shadow King is the main villain in this one. He is working for Apocalypse. He's under his control, and if I remember correctly, Apocalypse had most of the world's telepaths either neutered, like Emma Frost, or killed, because obviously a telepath is going to be a major threat to Apocalypse in general, because you can't physically defend against that. So the Shadow King is his guy. He lives in a little jar. Lots of cool stuff happens in here. Well, and this was pretty early in Warren Ellis's career. And I have always felt like this early Marvel period in his career is criminally overlooked, because his regular Excalibur run is fan-freaking-tastic.
I found Excalibur kind of stuck out to me as the oddest of the bunch, because they either used characters that don't really exist in the 616 in any prominence, like Emma Steed went by The Mask and Switchback, I think. And then with a cameo of all people by Stinger, played a decent role. Wendy, what's her name, was like the host for the Shadow King or something, if I remember right.
Mm-hmm.
and then a unnecessarily dramatic Moonstar, who was dark and would just torture and murder
That's
Wade
right.
until the Mask had enough and I think killed her because she was just too evil to be on their boat. It was a lot of choices made for drama that didn't really sit well with me. And Mystique was in there and she played a big role.
Yes, because obviously she's got that whole Destiny connection going on.
So for me, at that time, I wasn't as big as a Nightcrawler fan as I am now. So for me, at the time, it lacked a lot of interest for me because I didn't really care about Mystique, because what I knew is Rogan, Nightcrawler's mom, and other than that, she was evil, blah, 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 because of the animated series at the time painted her that way. And I think I had just read the Unlimited series, whereas Nightcrawler, which was kind of a lead-in into actual Age of Apocalypse, kind of. So for me, I was like, eh. But as an adult, now that I am a huge Nightcrawler fan, like it's totally different.
Right. No, I get it. Like for me, Excalibur is the one that I tend to remember the least, and not because it's bad or anything, but because I didn't buy it when the series was coming out. I only got it, years later, and I've reread it less, so there's lots of little bits in there that I just flat out forgot. It doesn't make it bad. It's obviously got a core story to tell in terms of the overarching narrative, but I mean, I have less of a connection to it than I do the other stories. Now, compare that to Generation Next, and that one's a bad mother because that's got the Gen X kids, it's got Colossus and Shadowcat, Meowweed, and they're all badasses.
They're all douchebags.
Okay, there's that, but
Generation X, I think it was well done, but it just made me angry. You got Chamber with her face. You got Paige trying her best to be a good guy despite her family being evil. You have Vincent, which is a great character that I just wish they would have
I don't think
included.
they ever tried to bring that guy into the 616, did they?
He showed up as a member of M-Plate's Hellions for like 2 issues, and then we never see him again.
Wow.
But he was great in Age of Apocalypse. And then we have Colossus, the asshole, and Shadowcat, the psychopath.
Yeah.
And I didn't like it. It just made me angry. Because it felt like being dark and killing off characters for the sake of being dark and killing off characters, which is always a pet peeve of mine.
I kind of feel like Generation Next is the title especially because it's about kids, quote unquote kids, that really hammers home just how deadly this world is, because it does not spare anybody. And I like that about it. Like, it is not afraid to jack with your feelings in this story.
Generation Next is also where they started introducing the continuity nightmare that is AOA Monet, because there's like 4 of them, and they never explain why. There's Know-It-All, which is this like psychic computer program, which is the only way they could survive Shadow King Psychic Purge. And then in Tales, I think it's called Tales of Age of Apocalypse, you have M-Plate and the M-Twins. And then in one of their revisits to Age of Apocalypse, they have Perfection, which is Monet St. Croix again. So it's just as if Monet wasn't a continuity nightmare enough as it is in the 616, Age of Apocalypse just kind of really doubled down on that.
Suckers.
So for me, Generation X is not one that I even read during, and I don't think to this day I've read the full series. And it's just because I can't stand the art. I know that that's an unpopular opinion, but Chris's art, I cannot for the life of me get into it. It ruins stories for me.
Wow.
That's the only thing I liked, really.
Yeah.
Well, just like to me, all the character designs are so strong. Like we've already talked about Sugar Man, but Quietus, the purple guy with the slash hair, Slash from Guns N' Roses, not the evil Ninja Turtle. Like the various character designs for Skin or Chamber,
Chambers. Was Skin there? Skin was there. Oh snap! Skin
yeah,
was
remember
there.
in number 4, Chamber Skin dies because he jumps in to save Chamber during the riot at the end.
Everyone dies in Generation Next because Colossus and Shadowcat are giant douchebags. Everyone dies.
Makes bad choices in Age of Apocalypse.
Doesn't Shadowcat die in Generation Next?
No, she dies in X-Men Omega because of Colossus. Exactly.
Because Colossus is a douche.
But she doesn't end up dying because she ends up somewhere. She ends up in another Age of Apocalypse in the future.
Doesn't he like trample her to death?
Yeah, because in her heart,
but apparently not death. She
doesn't believe that he would harm her, but he's so raged out that he tramples her and she doesn't phase. But
because she ends up with Star-Lord or something.
That's in 616. That's in something. That's in 616.
Yeah.
And that's also in Battle Worlds.
Mm-hmm.
Right,
yeah.
But that was from
it's the same
from the Age of Apocalypse.
Well, Battle Worlds was all made up, like dimensions mashed together. It's the same character design as Age of Apocalypse Shadowcat, but it's not Age of Apocalypse Shadowcat. It's just that badass design. Battle Worlds was confusing and hurt my head quite often.
I didn't try to read it. I'm getting confused just listening to you.
Like Age of Apocalypse, there was a million spin-offs that don't matter at all. It was just these alternative version stories that would play out for 5 issues, and we have never revisited it ever again.
Huh.
It was fan service series.
Yeah, it sounds very fan servicey.
Like there was X-Men 92 that essentially was. It felt like the animated version continued. I started a whole lot of them. I finished none of them.
Well, there was the Age of Apocalypse one, and they did have where Magneto and Emma ended up getting married.
Oh, the Secret Wars Battle Wars.
6 issues of it.
Mm-hmm. I had to, with the Rafa Sandoval art. Yeah, that was weird. That was just sort of fan servicey back to Age of Apocalypse with no real connection to the actual Age of Apocalypse. It's like, here's the characters again.
I really enjoyed it, but
there are a lot of really good Battle World series for what it's worth, but none of them mattered.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. It took me a minute to catch up to where you were coming from on that. So then we get into Weapon X. Brought to you by the regular Wolverine team of Larry Hama and Adam Kubert. Adam? Yeah, Adam. And this one has to do with Wolverine rescuing Gateway, or Wolverine and Jean Grey rescuing Gateway so that he can work his powers with magic to open a portal to go back in time. And this is where this title really gets into the situation with the human resistance in Europe, because that's where they're based and whom they're working with. And Age of Apocalypse Wolverine, despite only having one hand, functionally isn't that different from regular Wolverine, except that, hey, he's got Jean Grey in a relationship and they smush. And This is, if you're enjoying Larry Hama's Wolverine, which why wouldn't you? This was just a great continuation of that book in terms of quality. And we get a version of Gateway that's really different than what's in regular continuity, in that he's kind of like constantly stoned in a lot of ways.
But also, isn't he kind of badass, or am I remembering that wrong? Like, he fights.
Yeah, no, he's a badass. He also is key in opening the giant portal that allows, in issue 4, allows the European Alliance to sneak their army of Sentinels inside Apocalypse's perimeter for their final Hail Mary attack. Which is obviously key to how everything is going to end up. And very cool story. Lots of fun. You get to see what the dynamic between Jean and Wolverine is in this world, and that maybe Jean's not as happy as Wolverine or Logan is in this relationship, like, even though she loves him. And spoiler, she winds up with Cyclops anyway, which is just like, come on. Give Logan a chance, damn it.
I'm so over those two love interests. I'm over it. Like, I was over it then, and 25 years ago. It's done nothing for me now that whatever, but
hey man, Cyclops and Emma, that's my go-to right there. I'm so mad that they're broken up.
I am with you. I am, but when it came to Weapon X, like, everything you're saying, I am sure that it did great with, but I don't care about any of that. So Weapon X was my least favorite title, which is unsurprising since Wolverine is usually one of my least favorite titles. I guess it did its job well of replacing Wolverine. The two highlights of that comic for me was Gateway and Jean Grey's hairstyle.
Yeah, Jean with the shortish hair is pretty cool. I have to admit, in terms of character design, she looks freaking great.
Yeah, otherwise, I try not to reread that ever.
And I
will say the art in that, or in those issues, were outstanding. Like, they were top notch. Like, the backgrounds of it, not even like the main focus of it, but the amount of details that went into each panel and each background. I think I was rereading it a couple months ago, and I was showing you guys screen caps. I was like, how did I miss this as a kid? Like, if you just look at some of the backgrounds and the amount of detail that went into Weapon X, it's outstanding.
Well, man, I mean, at this point in his career, Adam Kubert was in full-on beast mode. Like, God, he could just do no wrong at all. And the villain of that was Donald Pearce, formerly of the Hellfire Club, formerly of the Reavers in the 616.
He's part of the Human Council, right?
No, I want to say that they were humans that had been forcibly cybernated by Apocalypse's, and it adds a new dimension.
The AOA Reavers.
Yeah, the AOA Reavers. It adds kind of a new dimension that we haven't seen, is humans that are forcibly made to work for Apocalypse.
So in the comments we have Ross stating that Wolverine's hair alone is worth owning that series. I despised Wolverine's hair. I felt like no.
There's so much hair product for floating around in the Age of Apocalypse for Wolverine.
No.
Yes.
But so we were talking about the Age of Apocalypse Reavers, and I'm going to bring back Tales. I think it was Tales. Maybe it was Chronicles. It was one of those tie-ins. We got to see the rest of the Reavers, and it was just the weirdest collection of people. It was like Robo Kingpin.
Look at that hair.
It was like Robo Kingpin, Robo Vulture, and Robo Bullseye.
I remember that.
Other person it might have been Robo Owl of all people. And it was just this weird collection of humans that got put together. And I hate that hair. Put together and cyborgized, and it was just weird but fun.
Yes. So, now we're getting into the main two books, Amazing X-Men and Astonishing X-Men. And Amazing X-Men was by the Adjectiveless X-Men creative team of Andy Kubert on art and Fabian Nicieza writing it, and it followed. It's kind of the less glamorous of those two books, but I kind of like it more because of it. But we've got Storm, Banshee, Bishop. Who am I forgetting? Quicksilver, Dazzler, Exodus. Yeah. And then over in Astonishing, with Joe Mad on art and Scott Lobdell writing, Morph, Blink, Sabretooth, and Wildchild. And they're going up against Holocaust to stop his clone army factory. And like big moves in these books. Bishop winds up getting captured by Apocalypse, and who himself learns that his reality may not be real, and the X-Men are trying to undo it. So of course he has a vested interest in hanging on to Bishop and torturing him mightily. But you also get Holocaust and Abyss as these two series' main antagonists, and they're so freaking awesome. Oh, Rogue, yeah. Rogue and Magneto are...
Iceman and Sunfire were somewhere.
Yes, they were... I went utterly blank. They were both in Astonishing. And for my money, I think this series is where Joe Madureira's art peaks. And I'm going to say that I do not like his turn shortly thereafter to incorporate all of the manga styling into it. It's just, it doesn't work for me personally. I don't like the aesthetic.
Another plot point in one of these titles that Ross sprung up was Angel, the club owner.
Yes.
Who was like a weird double agent, and then his assistant was Kama, and that all went badly. I'll be honest, when it comes to Astonishing and Amazing X-Men for Age of Apocalypse, the only things I remember is Angel and X-Haven, which was the club, and someone kidnapped Rogue and Magneto's child.
And that happens in Astonishing, if I remember correctly.
I don't remember a single plot point outside of that.
Well, it's weird because Amazing doesn't quite gel until Bishop gets kidnapped. And now they suddenly have to mobilize to try to rescue him. And Banshee sacrifices himself and kills Abyss, who has one of the coolest character designs. I just love like the way his body is just like unfurling and flooping around, and he's just really cool.
The world's largest Slinky.
Yeah, he's like a human Slinky with a big dimensional doorway in his torso.
A Slinky who in 616 is actually Nightcrawler's brother.
What? I thought when there was an issue where they finally introduced that character, he was not a badass. He actually died of the legacy virus.
He might have, but Abyss, Nightcrawler, Kiwi Black, and then like a bunch of other characters whose powers include the Dark Force dimension are all Velasco children? Some Hell Lord's children who have he has like a bunch of kids. It was Azazel, that's the one who had them all. Azazel's kids, and it was a Chuck Austin thing.
Yeah.
And Abyss was included in that lot.
Right.
Because when he eats people into his slinky coiled stomach, it's the Dark Force dimension.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. Huh.
And I don't think he died of the legacy virus, because I want to say 75% sure he shows up in X Factor Investigations as part of X-Cell, the group of depowered mutants, along with Marrow, Fatal, and Marrow.
Adam X.
Adam X was part of that?
Yes. Peter David has a lot of fun taking the piss out of that character.
Also, since we're talking about Amazing, I did love that Quicksilver and Storm had a relationship.
Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, we've
I
got
would
a version of Quicksilver in Age of Apocalypse that is a lot less arrogant.
He's less of a dick.
Yeah, for sure. And that makes me like him more. Or sometimes less, depending on who's writing Quicksilver in 616. Like, I love asshole Quicksilver when Peter David's writing him. Just perfectly arrogant.
I have a friend who is obsessed with Quicksilver, and if she ever watches the show, she will kill me for this. But
Ooh.
if you take the asshole out of Quicksilver, he doesn't really have much of a personality. He's just kind of fast, and that's the end of it.
Yeah.
So I wasn't a huge fan of the nicer Age of Apocalypse Quicksilver.
I could see how that could be. Yeah, definitely. And Magneto gets kidnapped by Apocalypse in Astonishing X-Men, I believe number 3, because while their team is out, Apocalypse strikes and kidnaps Magneto and his and Rogue's kiddo.
I miss Nanny. I feel like
I was just gonna say that. I love.
I feel like Nanny was my favorite character in the X-Men titles of Age of Apocalypse, which take that as you will. But I liked her. It was a cool concept, and Nanny deserves a 616 version.
Definitely.
I kind of feel like that's how Danger came about, to be honest with you.
You know what? That's now headcanon for me. Nanny is Danger. They are alternatives there, and I'm gonna live with that now.
I'm cool with that. Most definitely. And all of this together leads to the grand finale in X-Men Omega, which I will happily say is the first comic I ever bought that blew my mind so much I had to read it a second and a third time the day I bought it. Like, that comic is still in my firebox, and it's completely valueless. I don't care. I love that comic. It brings everything together so well. There is not a plot thread that goes unturned in X-Men Omega. Everything, you can tell the entire writing team in the X-Men world was in sync. Everything was plotted together, and it just dovetails in the flawless fashion. You get everything getting nuked by the Human Alliance. Freaking Wolverine kills Havoc. Right before right as he and Jean finally get together. God, what doesn't happen? Angel finds his conscience after playing both sides of the fence for years. X-Man wails on Holocaust. And then you get round 2 of Magneto and Apocalypse, which is
Can we just
brutal.
say that ending was as remember a kid reading that book from watching the animated series, that last couple panels while the ending, the last fight was absolutely horrifying, and I was like, I just want this for the rest of my life.
Yeah, definitely. Magneto, taking a beating from Apocalypse for the purpose of welling his power up long enough to have the power to rip him in two. I mean, God. You're a 14-year-old or an 8 or 9-year-old or whatever, 10 years old reading that, and it's just like mind-blowing. But to me, like, looking back on Age of Apocalypse, my heartfelt gushing aside, it is the way that everything just comes together. And I feel like, I don't want to get on too much of a tangent, but I feel like the current state of X-Men could learn a lot from that. Because the Dawn of X stuff is like, it's kind of working in one direction, but it's also kind of always sprawling out in different directions and starting new subplots that aren't picked up on again. And that doesn't happen in Age of Apocalypse.
Well, Age of Apocalypse, though, to compare Age of Apocalypse to the current run in comics, I think that it needs to be compared not to Dawn of X, but X of Swords. Because Dawn of X is not a crossover. It's not technically it's not supposed to be as entangled as Age of Apocalypse was. I honestly think Dawn of X is more entangled than the majority of X-Men comics have been in the past God knows how long. But Age of Apocalypse was an event. So I think the only way to compare it fairly is to compare it to X of Swords, which in a way is doing the same thing that Age of Apocalypse did, where with Age of Apocalypse you had the first issue, which kind of said, this is what we need to do. And then the multiple titles following through on those missions. You had Gambit getting the crystal. You had Gen Next getting Ileana. You had Nightcrawler getting Destiny. You had each title having its purpose. Kind of what X of Swords is doing now with you had Creation saying what the purpose was, and now we have all of the titles where the X-Men are getting their swords. Each issue has a mission, and then it's going to come, I'm assuming, come back together with the next X of Swords title before following through to the ending. So I think they are taking from that in a way that Age of X-Men did not. I will say this about Age of Apocalypse. It had a cohesion that Age of X-Men did not. Each title was just kind of doing its own thing in a way that didn't really tie into the main plot of the universe.
I think that's probably a fairer comparison. What do you think, Brian?
I'm not even going to touch the topic of what's going on in current run. I don't want anything to do with it.
Fair enough.
I don't hate it. I'll go on record and say I don't hate it, but does it keep my interest? No, I can go weeks without reading it.
Interesting. I'm actually the opposite. I haven't felt more invested in the X-Men in probably 10 years, just as an aside, just because it's so weird. And like, I've never read X-Men that reads like this, and that is continues to hold my interest, but that's a whole different show.
I think for me, it just takes away the current status quo is what takes away from what the X-Men have been for me. I'm not going to go back and forth into this. This is just how
honestly, despite me saying good things about X of Swords and Dawn of X and defending it, etc., I'm kind of in the middle. I'm kind of like, it's okay, but I agree with Brian where it's missing something that kind of ties it into the history of X-Men. Right. But I still think that X of Swords is pulling from the crossover pluses that Age of Apocalypse did.
And we can probably by about November we can do an episode talking about X of Swords or 10 of Swords or Cross of Swords, whichever you prefer.
Eventually we will do a Krakoan episode, which we've kind of been. I feel like we've been putting off. Maybe on purpose. I don't know.
And dancing around it, but that's going to be a loaded episode. There's some definite opinions about that. We'll get there. So
my final thought on that is I also do want to say that maybe it's not because I'm not interested. It's just that I have so much going on that I haven't been able to invest, because I do say, and I have said this in the past, that I think that in 5 years, maybe even 10 years, we're going to look back at this the same way that we do Age of Apocalypse. That I have said. And I do think that this is going to be a momentous thing. I just don't know if I like the direction where it's at, what it appears to be at right now.
Right. I think that's
so. It sounds like your opinion on Krakoa is kind of how I feel about Grant Morrison and Age of Apocalypse, where personally I'm not a fan, but I understand the impact it has on the fandom and X-Men lore in general.
I think that's fair. But yeah, I mean, to kind of circle our wagons back around to X-Men Omega, everything is revealed to be true that Bishop's saying. He's sent back in time. He saves Xavier. And this is happening again as the Imcron crystal wave is heading towards this reality to destroy it, because this reality is about to no longer exist. But we did have some stowaways that made it. And we talked about a couple of them. Well, I guess we talked about all of them, but Holocaust, Shuggy Man, X-Man Nate Gray, who's title was surprise, it's going to get a 5th issue and be a new ongoing. And
Dark
crap. Dark Beast, yeah. Dark Beast, who is revealed to have more or less created the Morlocks, which I to this day I don't like that. But he was there. So the strands of Age of Apocalypse are long, and I really feel like if you're talking about Marvel's greatest hits of the 90s, which is kind of renowned and somewhat unfairly, somewhat not, as a decade that did collectively did not produce their best work, you've got to say Age of Apocalypse is one of the best things Marvel did the entire decade. It was big, it was audacious, it took risks and paid off on those risks. Similarly, the Clone Saga took some risks, didn't pay off. But that's a different program.
But the Clone Saga mattered.
Nope. Different show.
I don't even remember the Clone Saga.
It's best to not.
That's not X-Men. It's not from Mutant Rock. That's a Comic Watch show.
That's no.
Are you talking about the Spider-Man?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Never mind.
Mm-hmm.
I know where you guys are at.
Oh no, you're good. Go ahead, Gabriel.
Okay, so are we gonna talk about the revisits to the Age of Apocalypse?
I was gonna briefly touch on them, but we are hitting an hour 15, so I didn't want to take too long. There have been subsequent visits to the Age of Apocalypse, probably most famously for me, just as a reader, I guess. They ventured back to it in Uncanny X-Force, and there's a lot of things. Like, I love Rick Remender's Uncanny X-Force run. I love it. If you couldn't tell from the X-Force episode, I didn't like what he did with Age of Apocalypse, though, because I don't really recognize it as Age of Apocalypse.
Yeah. They pop in a couple of times. They pop in Exiles because they have Blink and they have AOA Sabretooth. They pop in for the 10-year reunion, which does some weird things. They pop in for Uncanny X-Force, and then there was a whole series that took place in Age of Apocalypse.
Yeah, I think Dave Lapham wrote it. It didn't last super long, maybe 10 or 12 issues before getting canceled. And I think, to me, like, all subsequent revisits to Age of Apocalypse have failed to capture the magic of the original stories.
For me, they try to lean into here's these alternative versions of characters with Kikira, I think her name was, the X-23 version, and the Psylocke and Silver Samurai and North Star and Aurora, and they try to lean into it, but they don't do it enough to really capture that, I guess, magic, and it just makes things more complicated and more convoluted with each issue for me.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah, I kind of skipped that whole part when they revisited on the 10th year or whatnot. The only one that I remember was the more recent one with Battle Worlds, where they kind of revisited it for like 6 issues, which I liked it because it gave me nostalgia and to see, what would happen if. But overall, did it touch the light to the original? No, I don't think anything will. Yeah, and I'm okay with that because it gave me some of my greatest memories and really my introduction to fandom. So nothing, even if they do come up with something half as good, I'm still not going to like it as much just because of nostalgia.
The one thing that I almost liked about the 10-year is one of the big villains for the first part of it was the Guthries. With Sam, Elizabeth, and Paige herself having been shown to have survived the original run, and then introducing Icarus with metal wings like he was Archangel, and then killing most of them quickly. And then devolving into a Jean Grey story since she was apparently alive the whole time, which played into the Uncanny X-Force tie-in and whatever title it is that I'm not remembering that followed a depowered Sabretooth and Jean Grey and someone named Preacher. It was a title that happened, and
It's
I know, I
obviously
keep
not
looking
very
to see if
memorable.
Ross is going to chime in on that one.
So when we were talking about the revisiting, I don't know which title Ross is talking about, but he did comment that the best thing about it was the art. So I don't know.
I think he's talking about the Jerome Pena art in the revisit during Uncanny X-Force.
Okay.
And yeah, that's like this weird example of hyping people up for a return of Age of Apocalypse, or, just pick a beloved storyline, right? And then instead of giving people what they want, doing something weird and unexpected with it that nobody is really happy with. So, and again, I don't need Orange Hulk. I don't need Wolverine weirdly being Apocalypse now.
Here we go. That was an odd decision Marvel made. Where no matter what, there had to be an Apocalypse, so it was gonna be Weapon X.
Well, and it didn't make any sense continuity-wise either, because, are you at an alternate reality where I guess there was not a bishop and the nukes never fell, or what? Because I don't know, it just didn't work.
So I think, because they explained that in the 10-year anniversary, if I remember correctly, the nukes were gonna fall, but Magneto sacrificed himself to make sure they didn't fall.
Well, but that's different than what I'm talking about with the Uncanny X-Force.
Well, I thought the Uncanny X-Force story spun out of because when Age of Apocalypse ended, it was the belief that the universe ended.
Uh-huh.
And then it's coming back to me as I talk. The 10-year anniversary, the idea was that Magneto saved the world by diverting the missiles, but in actuality, Jean Grey manifested the Phoenix and stopped the missiles from landing, which allowed the universe to continue to the point where the title I can't remember, and Uncanny X-Force existed.
I got you. No, I think that actually syncs up a lot of the things that weren't making sense for me in the Uncanny X-Force run.
Yeah.
But you can revisit it as many times as you want, and you're never going to recapture that magic, and that's okay. Like Brian was saying, we don't have to recapture the magic because we've got the originals, and Age of Apocalypse was a creative and financial success that just was unparalleled at the time. And the fact that we're still talking about it 25 years later with, details burned into our memories and so much affection, I think says a lot about the quality of the work that was put into it. So, Age of Apocalypse, hooah. Guys, any final thoughts?
It was awesome. Go read. You can check it out at Marvel Unlimited.
True that.
The full series is there.
Woo!
What I will say is, even as a not fan of Age of Apocalypse, you're right. It is still burned in my memory that I can remember this much to talk about it. So it must have done something right. So
there you go.
Go read it.
All right. And I think go read it is the best place in the world to leave it. Thank you all so much for listening to episode 10 of Mutant Watch, presumably 10, maybe 9. I don't know. Maybe we'll fix it in post. But you can check us out on Facebook. We'll get it up later on. We were having some issues with the sign in on Facebook. And then it's obviously on YouTube. And then once everything is rocking and rolling on the editorial side afterwards, it'll be live on SoundCloud, Spotify, iTunes, etc., or wherever finer podcasts can be found. I'm your substitute host, Matt. Duna will be back with us in 2 weeks' time. And with me, Gabriel and Brian. Thank you, gentlemen, for this wonderful trip down memory lane. Till next time.
Bye.